guys! So this is my first video filming in the new room and I'm really excited. And for today's video, this is inspired by my friend Shannon who won my giveaway. And I was talking to her about just like she wanted some tips on like the basics, how to apply makeup. And a lot of questions I've been asked by friends questions that I think are really obvious that aren't to people that are just totally new to makeup. So if you love makeup and you know what you're doing, this is like not the video for you. This is for my friends and anybody else who needs tips on how to apply, what brushes to use, what order you apply things in. So that's what this is. So I'm going to start with primer. And the thing is, with like primer, the way that you apply it depends on what kind of a primer it is. So something I do often, this is a hydrating primer, is I will apply a hydrating primer, and then you know your primers that are made for like smoothing your pores? Those are just supposed to go in areas where you have larger pores, so like around your T-zone. So like what I'll do a lot of times is I'll apply a primer like this that's either like a hydrating primer or just like a plain old primer, and then I'll take one that's made for like your pores. This is the e.l.f. putty primer, and I only put that where the pores are, you know? Or like your mattifying primer that you can use all over your face, but the ones that are like made for your pores, I try to just apply those in the areas that I need help with. Or another thing is like if you're really oily, you can apply your matte primer just in the areas where you would get oily, like around your T-zone. So you don't necessarily have to do it that way, but it's, you know, you don't have to apply it to your whole face is what I'm trying to say. So brows, I find with brows there's no like specific order of things. Like sometimes I will do brow gel first, and then I'll go in with a pencil. When I use like a brow powder, sometimes I will use my powder and then a gel and then a pencil. Sometimes I use a pencil first and then a powder. With brows, I don't feel like there's any like specific order. It's kind of what works for you, and the same with like what type of a brow product you use. I tend to use a micro brow pencil, like a really tiny one. So this one is my one from e.l.f. that I often use, the Ultra Precise Brow Pencil. But if one of the thicker brow pencils works better for you, then do you. And if a pomade type of a product or a powder works better for you, then do that, you know? Just because this is what I do doesn't mean that that's what's going to work best for your brows, because your brows might be totally different than mine, right? Like mine are just like very sparse, but if you have like a really full brow, then you might find that using just like a powder is enough for you, you know? And the other thing is, I think if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I do my brows before my foundation. This is a little off from what most people do. So if you like to do your foundation first and then do your brows, that would make total sense, because I'm a bit of a weirdo in that way. The reason that I like to do it this way is because I find with my little micro brow pencils that they don't apply that well. Like I need my skin to be like dry, like no hydration in that area, no, otherwise it's just slick and the pencil doesn't go on as like pigmented as I would want to. It kind of slides right over. So even when I apply primer, I try to really avoid putting it where my eyebrows are, because that will make it, you know, smooth or hydrated, and then my pencil doesn't really stick as well. So if that's not a problem for you, then feel free to apply your foundation first, you know? It's just, for me, that's the reason why I do it that way. And it is weird, so don't feel like you have to do that. And as for like applying your pencil, if you're using a pencil, I always, as you saw, I try to like start underneath at the bottom. And I typically do like the bottom and then like the tail. And then I do the top parts, and I try to do the top parts like a little bit more lightly with a lighter hand. And like up towards the front is where I really try to do like the tiny little brow hair type strokes, you know, to just have it look more natural. So that's what that looks like. And then I just apply my clear brow gel over top, which I already did to my other eye, and I usually use the Benefit one. I have yet to find anything as awesome as this one, but I'm really on the lookout, and I'm looking to try some other ones. And then for foundation, I'm using this one from Pat McGrath. Now, another kind of tip I have is that when you're applying foundation, not all foundations apply the same way. So like if, whether like being with a pencil or a sponge. So like if you are trying a new foundation and you're applying it and you're not liking the way that it applies, and you're using, say you're using a sponge, try using a pencil or a brush the next time, you know, like you don't have to apply with a sponge. And a brush that I really like for applying foundation is this one from Eco Tools. It actually came in like a 3-pack. So, well, the other ones are over there, but there's a smaller one, which I use for like, you'd use for cream contouring. And then there's a really small one, which you'd use for like concealer. Came in this 3-pack. I got it across the river. I haven't seen it in any stores in Canada, but I really like these for cream product. And then for sponges, I think I've mentioned in my other videos, I really like, this is a beauty blender, but I think I already talked about how I really like the Eco Tools sponge that you get at Walmart or any drugstore. This foundation is a really light coverage, but I often like a light coverage for just like day to day. I like to be able to like see my freckles through my foundation, you know. So yeah, this foundation I find applies well with a sponge, but if it didn't, I would try using a brush, you know. Don't just rule it out and decide that it's not going to work for you. And in this video, I'm going to be using like powder makeup products, but I'm going to do a video in the next week or so, like probably my next video, where I use cream products, because I do often like to use like a cream bronzer, a cream highlighter. Lost my sponge. Found it. So yeah, I like to do cream products as well. And often when I do my cream products, I use them on days where I don't want to do like a full face of foundation. But I will do a video explaining how I apply, whether I'm using foundation or not using foundation, how I like to apply cream products, because I know that when I first started getting into makeup, that was like something I did not understand. And I remember like using a liquid blush for the first time, and it was a nightmare because I didn't really understand how you apply it and how it's different than using powder products, you know? So then I'm going to do concealer. Now, I like to do concealer after foundation, but that's something that I've had friends ask me as well, is like, do you do it before or after foundation? And some people will tell you that you do it before, and that's fine. With concealer, I don't think that there's a right or a wrong, but the reason that I like to do it after is because I like to use a color that is lighter, that, as you can see. This is the e.l.f. Camo Concealer, and I like to do that because I like to brighten areas of my face. So obviously where I've applied it is where I like to brighten. And if it's under your foundation, it's not going to do that. It's not going to brighten. And I especially like to do this when I've used a foundation such as the one that I have used that is very light coverage, because this adds coverage just in the areas where I might need it, such as my nose, my chin, where I get a little more red. So that's why I like to apply it on top of my foundation. But if you aren't looking to add brightening to any areas, then it would probably be perfectly fine to apply it under your foundation. And then the next thing is setting. The very first thing that I ever do is set under my eyes after I have applied my concealer. And I also just sweep it over the top, like my eyelid here, because then you'll get that crease of concealer in there. So that's the first thing. And with that, I always just use like a small brush that's fairly kind of in the middle, like a little bit fluffy, but not too fluffy. If it's a super, super fluffy brush, like this one's a little more soft and flimsy, it's just not going to pick up enough powder to really set that area. And then before I ever apply blush, bronzer, anything like that, I need to set the whole face with powder. And I just use like a brush like this. Sometimes I'll use like a bigger brush like this. There's no like right or wrong with that. Just the like lighter and fluffier it is, the less powder it's going to apply, and you don't really want to apply too much powder. So if you use like a really, really thick type of brush, you'd probably be like applying too much powder, and then you'd be looking a little bit powdery. And so I always apply in the areas that I'm going to be putting powder product. So like all along my forehead where I'm going to be putting bronzer, I want to make sure there's powder, because that's what makes your powders go on smoothly. If you just use foundation and you didn't set it at all, then your powders are not gonna, they're gonna look like choppy, patchy, not as smooth, not as nice of an application, you know? So yeah, this powder that I used is from Wet n Wild, and I really like this powder. It's so cheap, and I love it. So then when it comes to applying like your bronzer and your blush, which order you do that in, okay, sorry. So when it comes to applying like your brush or your bronzer, which you should do first, I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong with that. I personally like to apply my bronzer first, but I don't think there's really a right or wrong, as long as you're using powder products. And like I said, with cream products, I'm going to talk about that later in an upcoming video. So for bronzer, I like this one from Milani. This is kind of like a luminous bronzer. What I like to do is use a pretty fluffy brush. Sometimes I'll go in with a pretty big one like this, but when I use it, I kind of like squeeze it shut like that. But today I'm just going to use a brush like this, and I like to apply a little bit up on the forehead, just up here. And then I go into like the hollows of the cheeks. And I obviously start off just like, you know, just tapping like this is all that I do. I don't really swirl, I just do this. And I build it up how I would like. And then if I was gonna apply like a more of a contour product, like a dark, like a cooler toned contour product, I would pretty much just go in with a brush this type of size, and I would just apply it just a little more in the hollow of the cheek. I don't do that too often, but when I do, and then a lot of times I'll take it just kind of right on the tip, because this is kind of like pointed on the tip, and I'll just brush along the sides of my nose with it to give it just a really light contour, and I'll just go under the bottom of the nose like so. And then I usually apply blush, and for blush I honestly use a brush very similar to this, so sometimes I'll just use this same brush, otherwise I have 10 more that are the exact same type of a shape. And I, like I said, I just pat. I just did it, so I don't want to do it again. And I just sweep over the cheek area here. Same thing, I just go like that. And then if I want more, I'll obviously do more. But that's how I do it. You don't really need to like swirl your brush around. If you're using a blush that is like a pretty bright, vibrant color, I will often use like an even fluffier brush, like this one's a little fluffier, and I will literally just go like this and put it on, and I will build it up that way because I don't want it to be too much. And if it's ever too much, if I've applied too much, I will often use the brush that I applied my powder all over my whole face with right here, and I will just even sometimes I'll take more of that translucent powder, or I'll just, if there's some on here, and I just do this to try to, you know, blend it with everything else. And sometimes it'll take some of that blush away. Sorry for the squeaky chair. So then I apply highlighter. This is a butter highlighter from Physicians Formula. And with highlighter, I usually use a pretty small brush like this, as opposed to anything bigger like this. Because this, I'd be like, you know, this is like what I would apply blush with. Like it's pretty, that's pretty large. So I like to just go over the areas like this and, you know, blend up and down so that it doesn't look like one harsh line. And when I'm doing it, same thing, I'm just doing like 2 taps in like that. And then usually whenever I'm going to apply to like other parts, such as up here or my nose, I just use whatever is left over on this brush. I might do one little tap if I feel like there's not enough on there, but I don't really go ham by like rubbing it in here and then applying to like the nose or any other area of the face. Oh, and another thing that I forgot is that a lot of times with my blush, this is the brush I had my blush in, I like to just dab around my nose. There's like probably barely anything on here, but it just adds that slight tint that makes your whole face kind of meld together or whatever. And before I apply lip products, if I have foundation on my lips, it's not so bad today, but sometimes it's pretty bad. I take just this is my Glossier balm.com, a clear lip product like that, and I put it on, and then I will like wipe off what's on my finger on like a tissue, and then I wipe more of it off, and that's usually how I remove the foundation, because you need something kind of like greasy to remove that foundation off the lips. And then it also just preps my lips for when I'm gonna go put on lipstick in a few minutes, so I do that. first. And then going in with lip product, then I'll just go in with my lip liner. And I find having that lip balm there helps it so that the lip liner just glides on a little more like lightly. It's not going on in such like a harsh line, you know? Because I really like to just barely apply lip liner, you know? Like that. So with lipstick, I don't like to like go in and go like 10 times over my lip. When I'm, you know, just trying to have like a pretty natural look, I will apply a little, like see how I haven't gone over my whole lip, and then I just rub it in. That's like what I do for the most part when I'm trying to have a pretty natural look. And I'm not going for like a bright lip product, you know. And then I'm gonna do eyeshadow. So what I do for eyeshadow is I usually start with a really light color that's pretty close to my skin tone. So I'm gonna do like this color, which is just a little bit deeper than my skin tone. And for that, I'll take a pretty large brush like this, and I will try to just put it over most of the lid because that just kind of sets it. Because the same as with your face, you want to have like a nice layer of powder on your eye first, because that's what makes it apply nice and smoothly. When you have like a nice smooth blend of your eyeshadow, you need to have it set, or else it's not going to be smooth. It's going to be like a patchy application, which is obviously not what you want. And this just adds the first little bit of contour, like just barely. You can't really see it there, but then what I'll do is I'll take a brush that's a little bit smaller, but still a nice fluffy brush. It's just not quite as wide as the other one. And I will go in with like the next darkest color. So like this one here. And I build up that way. So I start with the lightest colors and I build up. So I apply this more aimed towards just the crease, not all over the whole lid. And every time that I do it, I'm just doing a tap and going in and then doing another one to build up nicely. And when it's where I want it to be and when it's even on both sides, then I'll go in with the next darkest color. And when I go in with the next color, I like to use something a little more precise. So see how this brush is like more pointed. And I'll go in with the next darkest color. So for this, I'm going to do this color here. This is my Tartelette in Bloom palette. This is like probably the first like high-end eyeshadow palette that I ever bought. Probably one of the first high-end products I ever bought in general, and I still love it so much. It's just like a perfect, like neutral palette, and it's kind of like a warm tone neutral, which I really like. I just like the tones. They're not like, they're warm tone, but they're not too like orangey warm toned. They're like this nice kind of clay reddish warm tone, you know? So yeah, I go just more precisely, and then I definitely try to pack a little more on towards this outer corner here, more so than in the center, like in the middle of the eye. And then when it's where I want it to be, but it's just a little unblended, I'll go back in with this brush and I'll just like up here to on all the edges, I will blend a little more just to make sure like where it ends and it's just like my eyebrow, make sure that that's nice and blend it in like so. And then I'll go in with like I usually do like a shimmer on the lid. And for my shimmer, I usually always just use my finger to apply. You could use a brush. If you were to use a brush, I would use like a brush similar to this, but maybe a little bit smaller, but more dense, a more dense brush. And then usually I'll do like a medium darker toned shimmer. So I used this one, and I'll do that kind of a shade on the lid, or like this tone. And then I'll take a lighter shade like this shimmer, and I'll do that just a little bit more towards the inner corner to give it more of like an ombre effect, you know? And then when I'm done with that, I will usually take like one of the brushes I already used, so like this one here, and just in the crease, I will go back and forth a few times to make sure that when I patted with my finger and any shimmer that went in the crease, it kind of like brushes away or blends in so that it doesn't look as messy, like so. And then I'm not gonna do eyeliner. I don't do eyeliner very often. I usually just do mascara, and I usually will like line my bottom lash line with like a eyeshadow as well. And I always curl my lashes. I'm using Marc Jacobs Velvet Noir mascara. This is just a mini size. This is like a favorite of mine. And that's my funny tip there. If I am doing my mascara and a little dab of it lands on my eyeshadow, usually I will lick my finger and I will just dab it off right away before it dries, and I find that that removes it without totally messing up my eyeshadow. If you let it dry and you try to remove it, it's like a whole different story, and it usually takes off your eyeshadow and messes the whole thing up. So that's obviously not what we want. Mascara. I take just a more pointed brush, such as this one that I already used, and I will usually do like either this shade or this shade, just depending how deep I want to go. Often I'll do both, so I'll start with a lighter one and then I'll do a darker one more towards the outside of the eyelid. Another thing is the concept of doing your eyes before you do foundation, which I 100% agree with. And I do that when I'm doing any bit of a dark eyeshadow look, anything too crazy. This is like a pretty simple, basic eyeshadow look, so I don't bother with that. But when I'm going in with some pretty dark, crazy colors, I definitely do that because it falls out. So you'll have powder, like eyeshadow, fall out here. And the other thing is, if say that I think I'm okay doing this eyeshadow without, but I have a little bit of fallout, I'll take just a brush like this, which this is the one I use to set my under eye. So all it has on it is translucent powder, and I'll just go like this and try to brush some of it away. And then I apply eyeliner or mascara to the bottom lashes. Now, when I apply it, you'll see it looks totally like snaky and gross. So I apply it, and then I go with my fingers. If I ever get some on the lid, I do the same thing with lick my finger and wipe it off. I go in with my fingers and I remove a lot of it. And it just leaves the amount that I would want, like so. And then when it comes to setting your face, I like to do that most times because I find that it just it makes all your powders kind of mesh together, meld into your skin. They don't look as powdery. And this is the Wet n Wild Rose Primer Water. I apply, and then a lot of times it'll feel a little heavy, just the way that it's sprayed out, and I just do this to kind of blend it in, get it where I want it to be, and that's it. So that's just some of my tips on how to apply, what kind of brushes to use. If you have any other questions about things like that, let me know. And like I said, I'm going to be filming with like cream and liquid products, which is a concept I think I get a lot more questions on than with powder products. So that might be helpful to a lot of people as well. And so look forward to that. Like I said, if you have questions, any other questions how to apply things, just comment or message me on Instagram. My Instagram will be linked down below, so please check it out and follow. Okay, so I'll talk to you guys later.